All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is VC Insights, moving from an operating role to VC with Portage Ventures. So this is being recorded. I'll send an email with a link once it's ready. And if you have any follow-up questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll get to them. Anish.
Yeah, hi. My name is Anish. I'm based out of Brooklyn, New York. My background was actually running growth for companies, both full-time and as a consultant for about 11 years. Then began actually building out an executive recruiting firm. Our specialty is focusing on hiring everyone, sort of head of growth, head of marketing, head of product, head of analytics. Most of our clients tend to be fast-growing startups. And now we're a team of 9.
Awesome. Hi, folks. My name is Jonathan Metrick. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Portage. So what that means is I'm on the platform team helping advise our portfolio companies, which are primarily fintech related, kind of in the US, Canada, and Europe, all over actually, with matters related to marketing and growth. I've been doing this for a whole 6 months, which I onboarded virtually. So I've been doing all of this on Zoom. But prior to that, I was a CMO of Policygenius in New York, where I was there for 3 years, helping scale up the marketing team. We recently closed our Series D round with KKR for $100 million in February. So on the kind of tech and marketing side of things there. Prior to that, was working at traditional Procter Gamble, brand building, consumer-driven marketing. Did a little bit of a stint in London, doing some education startups there. But yeah, nice to meet everybody. I know Anish actually from a growth breakfast that we met at in New York, where all a bunch of growth geeks would meet up early in the morning and go for breakfast. So that's how I'm connected to Anish. Nice to meet everybody.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Callaghan. I work alongside Jonathan. I'm fond of reminding Jonathan that I'm more senior than him because I've been working at the fund for 3 years and he only joined 6 months ago. So that's our little inside joke. Much like Jonathan, though, I have worked within startup. I've always worked as a sort of CRO, VP of sales sort of role, typically that individual who came in, started the entire sales function, or perhaps inherited a very small team, brought in best practice, ran it with a lot of rigor, scaled it out very quickly, and then basically exited the business. At this stage, I've had a number of exits and very happy to be here. I'm very much within the fund, a practitioner who now works with a venture fund. I hope that helps.
So VC Insights with BringRuckus is a series of conversations with venture capitalists to learn about what they look for in companies to fund, how they spot the best talent, and what is their advice for startup founders looking to grow or get funding. Now we're focusing more so on the transition. And let's get started with the questions.
Great. Yeah, we're getting right into it. When and why did you decide to kind of jump from an operating role into venture capital? And, when you kind of made that decision, how did you know kind of the right organization to end up joining as far as a venture firm?
Brendan, you want to start? You've been doing this a little longer than I have, so.
You're the senior one.
A little unclear who would want to take it first. I guess for me, I was minding my own business. At the time, this is 3 years ago, I was running sales for another startup. I had a sort of global sales role at the time. I literally had a team all around the globe, and I was running it from this space that I'm now sitting in. And the company was having a lot of success, and the team was growing, and it was all great. I was doing what I do. And then I got a phone call, and it was hey, would you be willing to give some free advice to a startup? And I went, sure, I'll sit down with someone. And I agreed to do it for beer. I said, yeah, buy me a drink and I'll do it. And so I did it. And then that went well. And then I gave another piece of advice to another business. Little did I know the relationship between these two businesses. And at the end of that meeting, they turned around and said, right, we want to offer you a job. So it was something very much that came to me. It wasn't something I was looking for. And I'm really excited that I agreed to give some free advice to a business for beer. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today.
Almost moral of the story is, don't turn down those sort of initial
Don't
introductions.
turn down free advice for beer opportunities. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I think for me, very similar. It wasn't really something I was targeting, and it kind of popped up on my radar. So I've been CMO of Policygenius. I've been leading marketing teams most of my career really, and this role came up from a contact that I had. I got connected with someone who worked in DC, and they did a lot of work in tech, so it was just kind of a casual introduction. And they mentioned that they were hiring for a role like this, which is to kind of advise on the platform team of a VC, the various portfolio companies on marketing and growth. And it felt different. It felt a little bit, it was a newer role. One or two of my other friends who used to be CMOs transitioned into roles like this, and they seemed to be having a good time with it. They seemed to enjoy the difference of kind of not just working with one company, but multiple. So I decided that I would check it out. So it was very organic, popped up. But it seemed like there was more movement toward that. And I feel like there's more folks that are taking this move from operating side going into VC, more and more.
Awesome. And when you did reach out to your friends and have conversations with them, what was the gist of a lot of the different conversations? Like, were there any surprises? Like, oh, well, hey, I didn't understand that that's part of the role.
Yeah, you mean in the sense of when they were working in the venture teams and the platform teams at venture firms. Yeah, I think it's definitely a bit of a different, tack. Like, I think, you aren't, I don't have a marketing budget anymore. So that's different. And so, that's one of those things that as a marketer is always a little bit fun to be like, okay, great. Where's my experimentation budget? So that doesn't really, you're kind of advising the folks that have those budgets now instead of owning them yourself. But no, I think by and large, the feedback was, it was interesting. You meet a lot more people. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. We were laughing how much easier it is to get someone to, open an email from you on LinkedIn if you're working in VC versus if you're working at an operating company for whatever reason. So I found that a little easier to get folks to kind of have a chat with me now that I'm working on the VC side versus just, being in the operating side. But it's different, but I think it was generally by and large positive.
That's awesome. We'll jump to the next one, Grace. What's the biggest difference you've noticed other than, not having a budget anymore, of your day-to-day role in venture versus, being an operator?
So the difference I feel, how would I put it? What's the difference? The difference I would feel is that, I'm sure much like Jonathan, I was so used to doing, I was the doer. I would make it happen. I was accountable to the number. I drove my team accordingly. I made decisions and I just got it done. And, I had that kind of velocity to all of my decision making, and everything I did was driving to this. The reality now is that I don't have a number. I'm not accountable to a particular performance of a team. I'm trying to support others in terms of what they execute. And then I think the difference for the fund, what's the difference for being VC versus working for a particular business? I have a broader view. We have to, as the fund, return our investment to our LPs. And, we look to ensure that our investments are successful, and we do everything in our power to encourage them. But when I was working for a business, that was all I cared about. So I had one child. Now I've got 10, 20 nieces and nephews, I think is the way I would describe it.
That makes a lot of sense. Interesting. So, especially from the sales side, obviously when people think of sales, it's very much go and just drive a sale, go and put your sweat equity into getting a contract back. So is your role doing any part of that as well? Or is it really, really high level strategic? How do you sort of integrate with one of your companies, both that is brand new to your portfolio, or since you've been there for 3 years, that you've been working with for a while? How does that translate?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think the way that Jonathan and I work really is at the behest of the investments. Now, our help is here. What they need is what they feel they need. We might have ideas, but fundamentally we're there to support those teams. And so depending upon the team, they have different needs, So I'll give you a fun example. There's an investment. They're setting up and implementing Salesforce for the first time. Now I'm kind of handy, I can do that. And so I'm helping them do that. That's what they feel they have a problem with right now, and I can help them today. Another team, they might be hiring their first VP of sales. It's been founder-led perhaps to that point. And now they're looking to hire true sales experience. And I might come in as part of an interview panel. I might try and source candidates, and I'll support them in that end. But really, it's what does the firm need? What does the business need? We're there to support, and we'll hold their hand as much as we can and help them as much as we can. And if we can't do it, like if my skill set is insufficient, then I have other people I can call upon who can support that business. We want to support our investments as much as we can and as best as we can.
Yeah,
that's great.
In addition to that, I would just say, I think you're doing a lot more context switching in this role, where at a Series B startup, you're in the Series B stage, and you're helping that scale over a year or 2 or 3 to try and get to Series C. With working with multiple companies, as Brendan mentioned, you can be working with, on my side, I'm looking to hire a, first person in marketing, or maybe the first performance marketer they've had, or the first email marketer they've ever had. And no one internally may know the expertise that's required on that front. And then that's in one meeting. And then I switch to another company who's looking to build, hire their CMO, and they've got a team of 20, right? And they're going to raise their Series D. So those sorts of kind of context switching is pretty active. And I think the difference is kind of breadth. Well, we have a lot of breadth here. We tend to see like the entire kind of industry, but you don't get as deep, because you may make the recommendation, but at the end of the day, it's the team that's still going to then hire that individual. Or if you're bringing in Salesforce or iterable CRM, one's actually implementing it, you're kind of just helping advise and then kind of moving on to that next project.
Cool. Jump to the next one, Grace. And thanks for the examples, both of you. Both of you just answered this, so we'll jump to the next one. And for those that didn't hear it, yeah, they both got recruited by Portage through very light methods. One was offered a free beer, and another one was offered an intro from a friend. This is actually a very good question, which may not have a great answer, which I'm very curious about. How do you measure the success of your role? Obviously both of you are coming from very metric oriented roles previous to this, where the KPIs, correct me if I'm wrong, were probably very simple. You had like 1 or 2 basic KPIs. How do you go about, does your manager give you specific goals? How does this work?
Do you want to go first, Jonathan?
Sure. I mean, so we both have the same manager, funnily enough. We both report into the head of our fund. And so, yeah, I think it is definitely a slightly different way of measuring impact and success than you would normally have, leading a growth org. I woke up every Monday morning looking at the lead pipe, like how many leads do we get? What do we need to close this week to make our number? And I think Brendan probably similar on the sales side. We have a bunch of indirect metrics, I think, for us to kind of track and move the needle, right? So Brendan did mention, we are very much partnering with our companies we invest in to yield growth and financial returns, right? And that's over a period of time, right? So we're not so much focusing on, how are sales doing this week. We're thinking about building capacity for the longer term and ensure that they can then get to that next stage of growth, get to that next stage of funding or expansion. And, there's a couple of ways that we can go about tracking that. So we, obviously kind of have like an internal NPS that we use, where we pull our portfolio companies to see, how are we doing? Are the projects that we're working on with you helping move the needle? Where else could we help you? So that's kind of one of the direct ways that we kind of gain, insight into our impact and feedback from our companies.
Yeah. I mean, totally agree with Jonathan. I think the only thing I would perhaps add to that would be add value, right? If, when our leaders talk to the CEOs of the various investments and say, right, did the time today with Jonathan, or did the time today with Brendan or Ron or Chris, I mean, there's a number of us on our platform, did they add value? Be honest. and that honest candor that we add value and that we helped that business is great for us. I mean, fundamentally, that's great. We, in terms of individuals, we look to impact. I think Jonathan used the word impact. So I can reference a business in Europe. They recently instituted a CRM project, but that started when I had a conversation with them in January of this year. So I know that was the catalyst. I noted an issue, I brought it to the fore, they investigated it as a team, and then they decided, yeah, this is something that they need to act upon, and they did. But that would be an example of how we impact some businesses at times.
Yeah, another one that would be relevant for you, the Ruckus folks, is hiring, right? So one of the portfolio companies I work with in Toronto, they just hired a CMO, and that was a search that we were looking for 6 months, right? And so those take a while. You want to make sure you get the right person, growth oriented but brand, that kind of marketing unicorn. Everyone's looking for that, right? So it takes a while, but we've now hired that individual. That's another element of driving impact, because the key thing you want to make sure you're doing is, again, as Brendan mentioned, it's not about us necessarily doing the work for them. Like, we're trying to build capability so that they can kind of internally do it themselves, which is a little different, I think, than on the operating side. Yes, of course, you want to build your team, but it really is you leaning in a lot to impact the outcome of the company while we're trying to build capability.
Makes a lot of sense. So almost like you guys will be judged at the end of whatever your periods are for a review on client NPS. Is that kind of the best measurement that your sort of manager would be looking toward?
I think it's one of the North Stars. Obviously, a high NPS score is important, but also, seeing perhaps demonstrative changes in the business, like helping to hire a VP of sales or a CMO, or helping set up a CRM system, or working on their value proposition or go-to-market strategy. Those sort of things come into play as well. But yeah, it's not as tangible as it used to be. I think that is one of the differences for me and Jonathan from going as operators to this role. I used to be held accountable to a number. I don't have that anymore. Jonathan,
yeah.
Same, right? It's just changed. It's just
also
changed.
I think the key piece is the time horizons changed, right? And I think, in the sense of, back in both Brendan and I, it sounds like, we were both watching our number daily, weekly, monthly, right? And that time horizon was really, make sure that we're doing what we need to do now to generate the revenue we need. I think within venture, you're taking a much longer time horizon, because you're looking not only for now, but what is that next step? What do we need to build today to be in a year's point at a certain element? So your time horizon is also different.
Cool. Makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that. We can jump to the next one. Yeah, this is a funnily worded question. How do you gauge your effort reward ratio as an investor? And maybe we'll even circle back on that. How does your role even dovetail into being an investor? Is it an investor? Are you somewhat of a partner in the fund in terms of the investment side, or is it solely support these organizations in marketing and sales? How does that all kind of come together?
Well, I think the word I would first use is we are partners. We, Jonathan, we, Portage, we like to partner with our investments. We're not just capital. I mean, there's obviously a lot of venture funds out there. There are a lot of sources for entrepreneurs to get funding. And, we're aware of that. They're aware of that. The reality is we come to the table with more than just capital. Me, Jonathan, the rest of the team, we're there to be used. We're there to support. And, we do so freely across all of the investments. But in terms of me and Jonathan in our role, no, we're not really part of that investment team and the decision to deploy capital.
Yeah, and we share in the success of the firms, right? And that's, I think, part of the difference of, venture, which is a little bit more captive capital for a long period of time versus, stock traders or publicly traded companies that every quarter you can dump the stock if you want to, depending on their returns. We're very much in it for the longer term, right? Like we have met with the companies, we have loved the teams, we love the product idea, and we work with them for years, right? So I think that's a very different relationship where we're looking to really build for a longer term time horizon, very much a partnership angle. Brendan is great about kind of, we can't really, in our roles, we're advising, but we don't make the decisions, right? So we very much have to work with the teams to try and advocate for what we think is right, but also just help them where they're going.
Yeah, and to be fair, none of the investments have to listen to us. They truly don't. All we're trying to do is pose, a level of thought or comment on a particular avenue that perhaps wasn't already on the table. Say, hey, have you considered this? And then it becomes conversation. And the only reason I can bring that to the table as a sales leader is because I've got the gray hair to prove it. And, I've been in those shoes, and I can do hey, have you considered? And it's that operating experience that both Jonathan and I and the rest of the team have, which really gives value to these teams that we've invested in, because, we get it. We totally get it. I've taken $50,000 out of my credit card. I've helped cover payroll. I've done that month after month. And I've had to go back to the wife and then the girlfriend when we got married and say, it's okay, we'll get the money back when I was working startup. So, we can really relate and empathize to the teams that we're working with.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that. And did you get your money back?
I did.
Okay.
She probably wouldn't have married me if I ended up not getting the money back.
Yeah, and also if you would have told that story and it just took a real hard left, and it was like, oh, and now
Well, I actually remember because, we were living together at the time. I pulled the money out. Hadn't told her. I pulled the money out. We're covering payroll. We were waiting for the check. It was one of these waiting for the check scenarios. And I come into the house and she goes, so $50,000. I went, yeah, I meant to talk to you about that. It was a bit of a tense evening.
You had an IOU. You were all good.
I was good for it. I ran sales. We were going to be good for it.
Credit card debt isn't real debt. It's okay. It doesn't matter. Cool. Thanks for running through that. And then also to summarize the investment side. So if someone was out there looking for an investment and came to one of you guys, it would then go from one of you guys to one of the investing partners. You're not exactly writing checks at this moment.
No. I mean, I do get occasional LinkedIn pings. I'm part of a number of groups which support entrepreneurs and young entrepreneur teams. And invariably something fintech or fintech related to our fund will come across my radar. When that happens, I simply refer it to the appropriate people within the team.
Yeah, and I think the other part of our role, in addition to advising, is so we do due diligence on prospective investments, right? So for example, if we're looking at a company and the investment team is considering whether they're going to invest in them or partner with them, oftentimes we'll be pulled in, Brendan can meet with the sales folks, I meet with the marketing team to get a sense of, okay, from on the growth side, if we're going to, cut them a check for, $20 million, and a lot of that's going to be deployed into marketing, how do we feel about that? Is that a good investment, or are they going to need to really, level up their team in order to kind of absorb it? So there is a due diligence factor that we do in addition to kind of our advising our current portfolio for prospective investments that might come in. But at the end of the day, the decision's down to the investment team to greenlight.
Yeah, and in fairness as well, the only thing I would add to that would be that my opinion or Jonathan's opinion or any of the other advisors' opinions were just one opinion, and it's the collective whole. It's very much an initiative led by the investment team.
Okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense. What did you notice about the VC verse that appealed to you specifically? I don't know what the VC verse is. I was
thinking like universe, VC verse, like the VC space, maybe.
Sure.
What's the question?
I don't know myself, but I think this is asking what appealed to you to jump from your previous worlds into this. I think you spoke to it a little bit in terms of like the variety of work, but were there any other things that were kind of appealing?
Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, on my side, I think, one of the really interesting things about this goes back to kind of the depth versus breadth. I think being at a company, I'm intimately now aware of kind of the insurance marketplace world, specifically life insurance and home and auto, right? Having worked at Policygenius for 3 years, and you go really deep into that area. But in this role, I actually, we're pretty focused at Portage. We do, fintech, that's our specialty. So financial services, payments, insurance. But, I have a much broader understanding now of the different types of companies that are startups in this space, but even taking a look at, we operate globally. So, how does an insurance marketplace look in Germany versus the United States versus Canada versus South America, right? And so you get a chance to really take one step higher view that I think is very interesting. And working in an operating company, you're very deep, you're into the weeds, which is great because you need to obviously, action things forward, but you really only have a sense of your immediate sphere. While I feel like in VC, you're a step up and you can really start to see trends a little easier in this sort of role.
Yeah, completely. I would add that, for me, the opportunity to work across a wider spectrum of businesses versus just, working for one individual business was really appealing. And that has given me a lot of, what's the word I'm after? It's given me a lot of happiness working with all these different investments. I've certainly learned a thing or two, far more than I ever knew before, certainly about fintech. But beyond that, I've had an opportunity to learn from other leaders because these investments do have their leaders. And I'm learning from those individuals, whether it be for the CEO or perhaps the other sales leader. But I'm certainly in this very fortunate position where I work across a wide sway of businesses in Europe, North America. And if I was working at one shop here in North America or here in Toronto, I wouldn't be having that experience right now.
Awesome. So some of the excitement, breadth versus depth, where you guys were very deep in your previous roles. And you can learn about other kinds of insurance now beyond just those two versions. Cool. Let's jump to the next one, Grace. Have you upskilled in certain ways since you took your next role? What's something that you had to kind of grow within your current role to manage current role, whether it's things you had to get better at? Maybe we start there. Maybe when you were jumping out of your operator role, were there things like, wow, I really would like to grow in these certain areas? And then in your current role, what have you had to grow within to get better at it?
Yeah. I mean, speaking personally, I'd admit to it, when I was responsible for my number and responsible for my team, I took full ownership. I took 100% ownership, and I drove my team, and I did what I felt I needed to do to have the success that we wanted for the business, as part of a founding team. That's the way I ran. And so when I moved to this role, I think there was a communication, shall we say, style that I had to adopt. I was very used to just grabbing it and doing it. I'll do it. And I would just grab it and I would do it. But that's not my role anymore. And so I think I had to adjust my communication style, certainly to communicate it more effectively with people. But the reality is I've learned a heck of a lot around VC and the VC landscape. I've certainly benefited hugely from that. But if I was to go back and say, what was the thing I really changed most over? Probably my communication style.
Do you feel you have to, maybe your communication style before it was more aggressive and now it's a little bit more conciliatory, or what are sort of differences in your communication style?
I think, I don't know if it's to use the word aggressive, but I would have accountability. So being a sales leader, if there's any sales leaders on the call, we're totally accountable to a number. It's very binary. You either hit it or you didn't. And so that kind of clear thinking drives honesty and candor in conversation. And so, when I'm pushing for my team to do what it needs to do in order for it to hit us, for us to hit our number, I sort of just push. I push. Maybe that is my style, but the reality is, I'm not the parent anymore. I'm just trying to help these businesses. So adjusting my communication probably was the biggest thing for me at the beginning.
Yeah, I think on my side, it would be similar, the approach of just, you're going to go in and do it with your team, and your team just, kind of tends to action what you've outlined, is different. I think also there's an element of scale, right? So I think, in a startup, you might kind of lean in, you just kind of get something done. Let's get it done quickly. Let's get it out the door. But, I think in this role, you're trying to create, either exercises or learnings or templates that can be used across a portfolio, right? So you don't want to do it just once, because you don't want to have that sort of conversation or that activity, then go and do it at 10 other companies. You're trying to then identify, trends or things that can be templatized to some degree, or at least shared more broadly, that are less personalized, more scalable. So I think that was definitely shifting mindset to that was a little bit different. And then I think as well, at the end of the day, half of our work is, Brendan working with sales folks, me working with marketing or growth folks, but the other half is us working with finance people in the fund, right? And so they think differently. They're very strong in financial modeling and scenario planning and, doing, tons of analysis on various different companies and, what's that going to look like. So you have to shift a little bit of your context that way as well. I mean, I think, as the CMO at a company, you're always preparing the decks for the board meeting and then kind of presenting your section. In this stage, you're kind of on the other side of that desk and you're kind of seeing a lot of these board decks and, you're looking at it from a different lens than the operating side. So that was also a little bit of a switch in context of being a little bit more on the financing side, doing a lot more discussion with folks in finance or a finance background than, kind of in the marketing function of an operating company.
Yeah, and completely an opportunity I'll say for us to learn, the things that I'm now more aware of because I've had this exposure with our finance team. Wow. It's such an education. So that's another great benefit that I feel and blessed to feel because I'm part of Portage.
Yeah, I think if we were ever to flip back onto an operating side and looking to go through a fundraise, like I'm substantially more informed as to kind of what all the different factors of fundraising is now than having been through it once or twice at previous companies.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And do you feel like you have to walk into conversations a little bit less kind of knowing the answer than you maybe did in previous roles, where someone might come to you and talk to you about their scenario, where maybe in your previous roles when you were deep in your particular functional area, this time around maybe you're a little bit more so like, I don't know the answer and I shouldn't go very, very aggressively and thinking I do know the answer because it's kind of a little bit of a whole new world.
I think the honest answer is if I'm comfortable with the subject matter, then I'll give my opinion because that's my role is to do that. If for whatever the reason it's out of my comfort zone, I'm very happy and welcome to pull in other people within the team who have a broader sense of knowledge. So, give an example. Jonathan and I are working on a file together, and I said, "Hey, Jonathan, this is really touching into your area a little bit more so than mine now," and I pulled Jonathan in. And, Jonathan joins the dialogue. And there's been numerous examples of that since Jonathan's joined the fund.
Yeah. We definitely, I think that's one of the nice pieces around having, a few folks that are experts in their own functional areas. Because, at the end of the day, oftentimes as you get into the more complicated, meaty challenges that business is facing, infrequently is it just one little area of a team. It usually crosses a couple of them. And so if you can draw on, like a CTO expertise, sales, marketing, a little bit of a finance or, kind of business intelligence side of things, that creates a very interesting model to really move a challenging project forward with some folks that, are then can, go off and do their respective pieces after. So that is definitely different. I think as well, on the concept of, you do need to spend a little bit of time getting to know those businesses, right? So there's 10 of them, not one of them, say you work with. And, over time you get to know them, which is great, but it does take a little bit more time to onboard versus, you come into a company, you kind of live and breathe the company for 3-4 weeks. Okay, you're getting closer. But with ours, you do really need to, spend some time with the folks. COVID makes that a little harder for someone who onboarded virtually. So you do that more on Zoom than going and visiting their offices. But yeah, that is slightly different.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. And then Nicole had a question in the chat. I think summarizing a bit of her question, what skills did you have from your previous roles to highlight that you could go from, being in something that's very depth oriented to something that's a little bit more breadth oriented. So from being a doer to more of an advisor, were there certain like in your interview process, did you have to speak to that a little bit to kind of convince the team that you could jump from something very focused to something that's a little bit broader?
I'll take a shot at answering things. I think the reality is both Jonathan and I had, success in previous roles at what were our organizations that our fund would invest in. So, to the point of living the life. So, we live the life of a sales leader or a marketing leader at an early stage business, and we grew with that business through its subsequent rounds of funding. And, we took it to an exit. The reality is, we did it numerous times. And so when we're typically dealing with some of our investments, this might be their first kick at the can. This might be that first sales leader's first sales role in terms of leadership, or perhaps someone in marketing. So the reality is we've seen and touched a lot of things. And so we can talk to broad strokes, and then we can see what they're doing. And we're peers. We're peers that come in and we go, hey, have you thought of this? And we just bounce ideas off each other. It's never a sort of, you should do this. No, it's a, have you considered? And we have a conversation around it. That's really our role.
Cool. And one thing I can speak to is, as people are jumping from doers to trying to get greater breadth, I've noticed a lot of people who have trouble being able to communicate that properly. There's a definite alignment with how many external conversations you have on a regular basis. It's not necessarily, are you capable of doing it? It's quite a bit, are you able to communicate that you're capable of doing it? And are you able to really put that out there so someone can ingest it in a way and walk away from the conversation and be like, all right, this person kind of gets that. And I think the difference from people who are good at that and are able to be, for lack of a better word, charismatic in sort of putting that forward, the difference is they just have a lot of conversations. So if you're looking to better communicate what your skills are and how broad that they can go, and that, you're not just stuck to whatever your current desk job is, go and have 3 coffees a week with people. I think that's great career advice for anyone who's trying to upskill themselves in any way. I've learned 100 times more from people I had one-on-one coffees with or Zoom coffees with than I've learned from those people's blogs or what they put out that's meant for mass consumption, because 9 times out of 10, those blogs are full of shit. It's stuff that's put out there to create a certain impression that person wants to put out in the world. And then when you actually get that person and you can grill them on a couple scenarios that are real, you get the real answer, you get the truth, you get the story of why they left their last company, you get the story of how they coped with it, you get these real stories. But then you're also able to put your real story out there and make a ton of mistakes. When I was first pitching our company to people, I was pitching it completely in the wrong way. And I was failing, but I was still getting a lot of those conversations and starting to learn what pitch was resonating and why people wanted to have conversations with me and why they wanted to avoid having conversations with me. And it just started getting better and better. And so, what I could say is, like, do that. Don't rely on blogs, don't rely on books, don't rely on, quote unquote classroom learning, and don't think that your internal job is going to help you level up to the next thing, and that your internal communications and all those internal meetings, make sure to schedule a lot of external meetings within your career with people outside of your 4 walls of your organization. That's what's going to up level you, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong, it might not work for some people, but I think that's helped people. Number 1, get out there and make those communications, and number 2, just get better with what you're pitching and how it becomes relevant and exciting for the person sitting on the other side from you. We can jump to the next one. Interesting. Was there anything that you guys were doing previously that provided you with an unfair advantage to help you get this job or perform better? Probably more so to help you perform better within this job than possibly, than the norm.
I think it's back to the point that we did the role. We're advising individuals or advising companies on the role that we used to have. And, we did that for numbers of years. And so that ability to have storytelling, relate tangible examples, my example of the taking 50,000 out of my credit card, that totally sings to any kind of founding team when they're early stage and they have to bootstrap, because they probably did something similar at one point in order to keep the lights on. They didn't get paid for 2 months because they were covering payroll for their team. They were the last people to get paid. So I can totally empathize and have so much respect for operators, so much respect for, entrepreneurs and founders, because they take those risks. And, we can all sit down and have a good story and share them. And as the businesses grow and they have more success, we can relate as well. A funny little story. I was sitting in a room with one of our founders. He'd recently closed his Series B, and he wasn't paying attention to me. He was playing with his phone. And we were talking, and then he went, "Yes," and I went, "Oh, what happened?" And he goes, "Oh, I just got the money. It just got transferred to my account." And I went, "Oh, great," because he was just closing his round and he received the funding. And I went, "That's great." He went, "Already spent. It's already been gone. It was done." He knew where he was going to be over the next 18 months to 24 months, and the money was already spent in his head. And so he was just distracted for that moment. But I remember that same moment when I was in his shoes. And I went, "Yeah, I remember that as well." It's so quick. And those moments are so special because we're peers and we can relate to each other.
That's amazing.
It's really great.
That's amazing. Has COVID changed anything? This is a question from Rahul in the chat. Either in the fintech industry, in how you are working with your portfolio clients, maybe, a greater insistence on profitability or anything else?
Yeah, I'll get to that. No, Brendan, you probably have to roll off. But let me take that one from a kind of overall portfolio perspective.
And just one thing really quick, and it just goes to show that you could be family first in venture as well, because Brandon said he has a 2:45 hard stop to grab his kids. And
right. I have to go collect my daughter from school, so this is a hard out. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on this panel. I really, really enjoyed it. If anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, by all means do. We can chat there. Raul, I think you're my friend. I know who you are. You're the finest COO I know to man. Hope Columbia is treating you well, my friend. Okay, take care.
Bye, Brendan. But yeah, on the side of kind of has COVID changed things? Yeah, absolutely. I think in the immediate throes of March, I think everybody went through this. All those plans that were 2020 projections all got redone, right? And I think it was a mad dash within March of what's happening. Are our revenues coming in? Are all the CACs and the CPAs by channel, are those still relevant? Is historical data even relevant anymore? Do we need to redo our projections to see how much cash do we have in the bank? Can we operate for 12 or 18 month time horizons? So there was a mad dash, I think, in the first few months of COVID to really batten down the hatches, make sure that the finances were secure. And now that we've emerged into summer and now into fall, I think things have restabilized, and in very much cases, I think fintech businesses have actually benefited largely from the fact that more consumers are shifting online. You're not going into a mall or going and walking around to, your traditional financial institutions as much, or meeting your broker for a coffee shop, kind of catch up. You're doing a lot more of that online. And I think fintech specifically, I think, is very well positioned to ride this kind of change in consumer behavior localized to COVID because of their offering that leans first digital and is oftentimes cheaper and kind of more efficient from a consumer perspective.
Makes a lot of sense. Were your portfolio companies a little bit kind of worried and kind of stressed out with it, or is fintech one of those industries that's not kind of hit as much as some others like retail or luxury or travel?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was definitely that initial wave of, is the sky falling? And I think everybody felt that, right? And I think in the March, April timeframe when the cases were going up and, everyone wasn't going to work. And I think that initial question of, can we even do our jobs remotely? That was an outstanding question, I think, for everybody. And, here we are 6 months later doing, these calls on Zoom, and this is kind of standard now. But I think, yeah, there was definitely an initial, wow, what's going on? And will we be able to survive this? And I think by and large, many of the businesses that are more tech related, I think have done well. I think getting in front of consumers in a more scrappy digital way. I think COVID has forced businesses to reimagine some of their operating procedures, some of their distribution mechanisms. And, startups are well positioned for that, right? They're more nimble, they're smaller, they can make decisions faster. They're more used to, agile testing and launching and testing new things quickly. And, there are benefits to and rewards that are going to companies that are leaning into reimagining, what the distribution models look like. And, fintech, I think, is in there. It's a little harder if you're a legacy retail business with, 100 or 1,000 stores across America to, pivot in the course of 3 months.
Makes a ton of sense. Jump on the next one, Grace. I think you've talked a bit about what you've gained, but do you miss anything about the old days?
Yeah. I definitely miss having, a team. I think I've got like lots of teams now. I definitely I created a Slack group with all the kind of, growth marketers and the different funds and the companies within the fund, so we can chat. But it's not quite the same as, being able to, virtual happy hour now, but going happy hour with your team and that sort of thing. So that's a little bit different. Not having a marketing budget is different. When I started my career at Procter Gamble, when I was, in my early 20s, I had a marketing budget of $40 million working on, kind of brands from Procter, right? So that's been pretty different to not actually, see an opportunity or see something new in market and be like, yes, let's deploy capital there tomorrow. So that's different. Those probably would be the two biggest pieces, I think, in terms of the team element. And then, yeah, just having your pulse on, the ability to kind of execute quickly if you see an opportunity. I think that kind of resonates with maybe some of the growth folks on the call who are, driven to that sort of role because you're constantly looking for new trends and new areas to maybe suss out. And, it's a little bit different being on the advising role.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Do you get frustrated with some of your like portfolio companies that they don't move fast enough with your suggestions?
By and large, they typically do, actually. I think it might be different if I was working with, bigger stage companies, later stage that were, huge, like trying to advise Coca-Cola to change their marketing strategy. My time, yeah. But I think, at earlier stage, they're very eager and excited for the advice, right? Many of them maybe are doing it for the first time, or, even in the growth world, if one of my peers came up to me and was like, hey, by the way, you should try this thing, it's a pretty good growth opportunity, I probably would try it. So I think it's, within the stage that you work in, when they're growing quickly and, they're kind of agile and excited to try new things, typically they're on board, I think, as long as, you're aiming in the same direction that they want to go to.
Okay, awesome. That's really great. That's great to hear that they're all moving really fast too. You never know as kind of an outside advisor whether people are going to listen to you and move forward. Not just like, yeah, okay, Jonathan said this.
Totally. Again, back to that point earlier of kind of having been in their shoes, right? I think if you're kind of just a general investor and maybe you've seen you've invested in these companies, but I've been there on those. Friday nights before a deployment and does it work, or sending out an email blast and, reading it 6 times before you push send because you want to make sure there's no errors. Like you've been in their shoes. And I think that creates a bit of a different dynamic than if, someone's kind of giving you advice, but they've never executed that before. So they don't really know. I've been in that shoe before. I've, been in the junior side of things and also on more of the leadership side of things in marketing. So I think that kind of helps create a stronger connection and more of a shared experience.
Makes a lot of sense. And maybe your suggestions are just really good. Maybe that's part of it as well.
I hope so. I don't know. You'll have to back channel that one, Anish. I'm sure you could probably do that. We've got a lot of folks in common that we know.
I will. I'm going to send an email to every single one, like to Jonathan's.
Please do.
Is he a VC, so you just can't tell him that his stuff sucks? Yeah, or, just really.
Yeah.
Is there part of that? Because actually, so when I was in-house running growth at a company, and we had a VC, and there was a direct growth partner that was assigned to me, basically in your role. there was hesitancy in sort of laying it all out for this person because, I feel like portfolio companies aren't always like completely forthright with their investing partners because they don't want to alarm their investing partners. Also, investing partners have the capability to fire the CEO. So, if the growth partner knows that, well, we aren't doing as well as we should, can you sense that in some people, or just something you can't sense unless they're very like honest about it?
Yeah, I mean, there is that element, right? For sure. I mean, I think it's kind of, with someone who's a little bit more informed in the growth space, I probably can get an assessment of, well, does your attribution model make sense or does it not? Right. I mean, I probably have a decent sense of that, having built a few of them myself. So I think there is a little bit of, yes, absolutely. There is a back channel and connecting into the fund. But again, I think the other component is, this really is a partnership, right? This isn't a quick win on something that, is a flash in the pan. Like, we're really trying to build these businesses together. We've invested capital in them for a long period of time. And, they're only going to do that it's not by meeting your quarterly number, it's by meeting your year targets and multi-year targets. So that creates kind of a shared understanding, hopefully, and a bit of trust where, these are just ideas and these are recommendations, but, we're coming from a pretty good place in terms of the recommendations. So I've found, at least, kind of since I've been in this role, there is a lot of shared alignment. But yeah, I think there's that kind of side of, if you don't want to take the advice, okay, that's totally fine, but you probably should have some other thing you're going to do and a reason why, maybe. But it is a conversation and it's a partnership, more or not.
Sure. And I mean, less of taking the advice, more so of like just not sharing certain information with you. Do you, and it's probably something that someone's not going to outright say, by the way, I'm not sharing this information with you, but like that you maybe just like sense in a conversation, like, this person's a little worried.
I mean, that's totally fair, but it comes back to building trust, right? And I think for me, it is, the way I've approached this is I come in and just try and add value, right? And so I'm attending these meetings. I'm willing to, one of the companies I worked with when I first joined, I wrote their press release for a new, product that they were spinning out, and we ended up getting media coverage from it because I did it on Friday night, right? So those sort of things end up creating, okay, well, wow, like this isn't just like someone who's, I'm willing to also roll up my sleeves and do some of the work. And I think that helps build some of the trust with some of these folks being like, hey, like maybe, there's a number that's coming in that's lower than target. I'd love to be in a scenario where they come and ask me first and I can maybe brainstorm with them to try and turn that around versus them then going to the board to the next board meeting and going this target.
And then a question from Ben. Actually, no, Ben from a decade ago. Good to see you on here. From working together a decade ago. What are some trends in what's getting funded these days? Obviously, you have a very fintech focus, but that can go in a lot of different directions, to apps, to insurance, to all over the place. What have you guys been kind of eyeing these days? And what have you noticed a trend in the companies that are actually getting that funding?
Yeah, I think so. Fintech is hot. I mean, I remember back in Policygenius' days, before insurtech was even a thing, we just like attached ourselves to fintech, as at least it was like a term people were using. But our fund focuses exclusively on fintech globally, so there's a lot of movement in that. I think that the companies that are doing well are really the ones that are trying to create solutions that are better for their customers, right? I think a lot of the incumbent financial institutions, insurance companies, they've had the same way of selling their businesses for literally decades. And, there's a lot of fees that are attached to that. They're very complicated products that people, I always joked at Policygenius, like no one wakes up on a Saturday morning being like, oh, I can't wait to research insurance. Like no one wants to do that. So I think there's a lot of room for companies to reimagine, products, make them a little easier, educate consumers, save them some money. There's a ton of fees that are created around financial services and transferring money and payments. And, so there's a lot of companies that are reimagining that. And when they've done it digital first, right, I think they have a lower cost structure. So they can, reimagine how much does it really cost to have a checking account? Does it need to be $12 a month? I don't know, right? Do you have to pay $5 every time you do a wire transfer? So those sorts of things I think are really where a lot of startups are getting traction, reimagining, financial services in a digital way. And then I think from a just growth side of things, because I always love, the latest growth trends, which is always the eternal question of life. A lot of companies that are leaning into SEO are doing quite well. So generating a lot of organic content that folks are then finding on Google and finding your website. That's kind of one of the key trends, I think, which is going to continue on. I think automations is big. So folks who are creating automated scripts for auto bidding on things like Facebook and Google, that's pretty hot. I'm pretty bullish on that. So I'd say those are two areas that when I see a company that's doing things like that, I get pretty excited.
Cool. And one last question, and then we'll wrap things up here. But do you have a favorite fintech company, whether it's one of your portfolios or other ones where you're like, I really like what these people are doing here?
I mean, I love, it's similar to Brendan. I think like I love all my children. They're all great. I think,
Nice.
you know, so there's different folks in different geographies that are doing cool things, right? I mean, you know, in Canada, Wealthsimple's doing great. You know, they're kind of a robo-advisor. Co is also doing some awesome stuff. In Germany, we work with Clark, which is kind of the, you know, leading insurtech in Germany. They all have their own unique pieces that they're doing really well. I think that's one of the interesting things around, you know, working in venture. You really see, you know, you don't need to be good at everything. You just have to do something really, really well, right? Maybe one or two things. And that can be different according to the company. So, and here's Brendan back. Oh my gosh. Just before the close. That was a quick turnaround.
That was great. Well, then I can ask Brendan.
It's a successful mission.
Sorry, say that again.
It was a successful mission. I collected my data.
Awesome. So we have a closing question here, which I asked Jonathan and he danced around. So Brendan, do you have a favorite kind of fintech company these days, whether it's one of your portfolio companies or not, that you're like, I really like what these people are doing?
Sorry, you can see I just got distracted. Do I have a favorite fintech company at this moment?
Yeah, whether it's one of your portfolio companies or not, where you're just really impressed at what they did.
I mean, there are several that spring to mind. I think I'm going to go with our portfolio. I mean, some of the businesses that we have within it. I'm going to single out Dialogue, and I'll single out them simply because of what they do in today's environment. So Dialogue is a telemedicine technology here in Canada, and they've been able to help so many people with COVID and COVID-related issues and health issues in general, that, you know, we as a fund investing in them at such an early stage and seeing all the good that they're doing right now in Canada, helping so many hundreds of thousands of people, just gives me so much pride to know that we helped grow that business and seeing all the positive that they do. I've just got to call them out.
Amazing.
'Cause in today's environment with COVID, yeah, I mean, talk about a business that's making a real positive impact. So hats off to Dialogue.
Amazing. Well, thanks everybody for attending, but most importantly, thank you to the panelists, Jonathan Metrick and Brendan Callaghan. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge